So welcome to another video from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander, and today we're doing the latest episode of From Cover to Cover. So this is a series, if you don't know, of videos that I have decided to kind of make on the channel, where we talk about books that I've read and war games that correspond to those books. And it's in an effort to both force me to keep up my reading, but also because I think early on in my wargaming hobby, I was guilty of playing a cool game and thinking, hey, this is a cool game, I'd love to know more about it, or read more about it, or learn more about it. And then playing a new game and forgetting that I had thought that. So I felt like if I did kind of more of a dedicated series, first, it just puts out there something that I love, which is reading. But also, it might keep me a bit more honest about following through with some of the things where I'm like, oh, that was neat. Or I read something about that. I want to play some games on that. Or if I played a game and I'm like, dang, I want to read a book about that. Let's go find a good book. And kind of seeing where those two line up, and you know, it just helps to make my hobby experience a bit more well-rounded, I feel. So anyway, basically this is a book review video where I will then talk about some war games that correspond to what's in the books. That's the reality of what we're doing. So thanks for sticking with me, I appreciate it. So today we are talking about the grand, the epic, the classic War and Peace from Leo Tolstoy. So, War and Peace. You do not need to listen to my opinion about whether this book is good or not. My opinion on this book is frankly irrelevant. This book has a extremely well-renowned status as being probably one of the best novels of all time. And it has that for a reason. I finished this book in December of 2023. I started this book in December of 2022. And that might sound like that's a lot and that's scary. But the reality is I started it in December 14th of 2022. And I read about 1,000 pages. And it took me about, I'm going to say, 3.5 months, because I think I stopped reading it at the beginning of April. So I read it for December, and then at least January and February. I don't really remember, but then I kind of put it aside. I was 1,000 pages into it, and I then basically I read a couple books the rest of the year, but then fell into a big reading slump. And then it got to about November time, it was more like October. Anyway. No, we'll say it's November. It was November. I really got back into reading again, and I picked this up and finished the last about 350 pages that I needed. So I finished it within a calendar year, but it also, like there was an 8-month break or something stupid like that. So you can read this in a reasonable amount of time. It doesn't have to take you a year. However, you can take it slow if you want. So just don't let the size put you off if that's something that's putting you off. The other thing that I will say is I have this wonderful Penguin Clothbound Classics edition that my wife very generously bought for me. And when I started to read it, this is the edition that I was reading. And I read, you can see my bookmark here, my little ribbon. I read 69 pages, which is the nicest amount of pages. And reading this in hardback is not something that I would advise. So what I did is that it was not enough to have just that. I bought the paperback version of that same edition. So the Clothbound Classics, this is the Penguin Deluxe Edition is what they call it. Yeah, Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition. It has all the deckled edges, which I actually kind of hate in a book this big. And the deckled edges, I don't know if you can see that. It's all uneven. It just looks like they didn't cut it, which is kind of true, but yeah. it's got very regular crenellations, like a castle, is what it looks like to me. However, the important part of this is that it's a paperback. I could beat it up. You have to crack the spine on this bad boy. Reading it in a single volume, I did it. I don't know if I'd recommend it. If you can get separate volumes, it'd be much easier to physically handle, or an ebook version of it. That'd also be great. The last thing that I wanted to say is that this is a translation, right? I don't speak Russian. I don't read Russian. I know a lot of people do not do that. So what we're going to talk about is the translation. Because the translation that you read will have a reasonably significant impact on your reading experience. I know the original Constance Garnett version that was approved by Tolstoy himself, there's nothing wrong with it. It reads like all of Constance Garnett's books, which I've read. I've read some of her Dostoevsky and some of her other, like I think I read some Turgenev from her. Like, if you've read any of her books, she has a style, and they're all kind of the same. So I feel like you lose a little bit of the original author's voice in her translations. I don't want to disparage her. She did incredible things for the translation world, and I'm very indebted to her. But the art of translation has come a significant way since then. And this edition the translation is by Anthony Briggs, and it is his 2005 translation. So it is modern, and it is English. That is the other important part of it. If you read this particular edition, he uses a lot of English, like idioms and colloquialisms in it, and he also uses English regional accents for various different kind of the Russian strata of society. And what I mean by that is like the Russians, like peasants, they all sound like black country, English country, like bumpkins. If you've read like Tess of the D'Urbervilles, they all sound like that. But all of like the serfs who were in the army and all like the enlisted army men, they all sound like Cockneys mostly, with a few like, Yorkshiremen tossed in. And he writes out the accent. So you have to like read them aloud to hear some of the words that they're saying, because the spellings are not real words sometimes. I don't have an issue with that. I'm English, I'm very familiar with those accents. However, I can understand why some people might be like, what on earth are these peasants saying? And why isn't there a footnote translating those? But if you read them and say the words aloud, you can hear what they're saying in that accent. So just understand that that's one of the kind of idiosyncrasies of this particular translation. The other thing I'll say is I absolutely loved it. This book was incredible, but this translation was incredible, in that it was incredibly easy to read. It was so smooth, it wasn't difficult, it wasn't awkward, it was just like, you almost couldn't tell it was a translation. You kind of can if you've read any other Russian literature, because Russian literature has a very distinctive styles in it and the things that they talk about. However, the actual prose were about as buttery as they can be for a translation into English. The other big point of note in this is that they do not have massive blocks of French text. And to all my French readers out there, I'm very sorry about that. I have other. Do I have other versions of War and Peace? No, but I've seen some. I have a couple of Anna Karenina's, which are similar, where they have just like a massive block of French, because he wrote the French out, because the aristocracy spoke French in Russia. And then you would have a massive footnote of that translated into English. In this book, they just did away with that, and they just have the speech in English, and then just say, he said in French, right? And that's just like the license they took from it. It makes the book less long. The page count is smaller because you don't have so much French into English that was frankly unnecessary. And you get, I don't think you lose anything by omitting that, understanding that they are talking in French as the aristocracy, which they do mention, and they talk about how they speak French badly at times, and they'll be really bad English, and he says, like, this is his speech that he gave in his crappy French, and like, you get it, you understand that, it's very obvious. Okay, we've quaffled on about a lot of that stuff. This book is 1,358 pages long. It is it's right up there with one of the greatest books I've ever read. It is incredible. It is everything that I was expecting in it, and honestly much more. Okay, I'm going to admit to being wildly uncultured. I did not know the story of the plot of War and Peace before I started. I haven't watched any of the films or the TV shows, and if anyone had told me in the past, I had not paid attention. The only thing that I thought that I knew was that it was my understanding that there was some kind of a love triangle between Pierre and Andre and Natasha. So we're going to talk about spoilers. If you don't want the ending of this or any of it spoiled for you, just go watch a different video. It is not really a love triangle. Just Andre dies. It is like, oh, that's really sad. And then Pierre and Natasha get together at the end. Like, but in my brain, I didn't know that's what was going to happen. I figured people would die and there would be love, but like I did not know that that was going to happen. And so as the story was progressing, I was like, oh, they like really like Pierre doesn't meet Natasha until like halfway through in any meaningful way. And I was like, this is interesting. And nothing really happens. And then and then they have this moment, and then Andre dies at Paradino, and you're like, oh, okay, he died. And then there's like 300 pages at the end of the book after Andre dies. Like, okay, it was just like wild to me because I didn't know anything going into this. One thing I would say is that you should not be afraid of this book. Yeah, it's long, but you can buy an edition that's like that it's broken up into 3 volumes. You can absolutely do that, and if that makes it easy for you to read, you should, because I do think this is a book that if you have the time and patience and gumption to read it, you should do yourself the favor. It was everything that everyone had said that it was. It is very long. It at times is a little bit self-indulgent with Tolstoy's tangents and ramblings about the theory of history, the philosophy of history, and some of his contemporary historical criticisms. You do get some of that, especially at the end. It's very thick with that. But the actual plot and the narrative is unbelievable. He writes human characters and human interactions with a level of precision that only an artist can. And I think that's why I love literature so much, is because you get to have words put to emotions and feelings and connections and relationships that often I can't express in words. But Tolstoy does, and you're like, so there were times where I'm reading it and it was like you had to catch your breath and close the book because it speaks to something that you were unable to voice for 35 years. And it's an incredible feat for him to be able to do that across 150 years, 150 plus years of time, and through the grave. It really is wonderful. Okay, we're going to waffle a bit about literature, but wars and war games and military history, because there's, honestly, some of the peace stuff is some of my favorite stuff in this book, but the war side of things is also really well done. And I don't know if I was surprised by that, but I wasn't surprised, but I was very happy that it was also equally as well treated. I don't want to be reductive, but it's almost like it's like a bunch of sharp books stuck together, but actually well written. And what I mean by that is you have this flow of like, here's all these characters at peacetime, and then you get like, then you get into like some battles in war, and then it's like, hey, we step away from the military campaigns, or there's a period of kind of not doing combats and stuff, and then some stuff on the home front happens, and then we go back, and it's, hey, it's the Battle of Austerlitz, and it's like really intense, and then we're going to take a break from there, and it's what happens at home, what are the after effects of that, what's going on with our cast of characters whilst that's going on, how is certain news received, what's the actual campaign looking like between Austerlitz and then, you know, Smolensk and Borodino, and then you have the Battle of Borodino, and it is incredible that you have, you know, the French taking Smolensk and the retreat from Smolensk to Moscow. You have the abandonment of Moscow, the occupation of Moscow, and then you have the retreat and the harrying backwards towards the west, and then you know the victory of Russia as it is, and it was just the ebb and flow of the book was incredible between all of those things, but the battle scenes are extremely vivid. You know, even down to the details. You get the grand, broad scopes of these Napoleonic battles, and they're wonderful. But you get down to like the sounds and the smells at a personal and tactical level as well. And both of those are equally well treated in their own different forms. And some of it is stunning stuff. I was also impressed with just how much emotion is packed into this book. There are times where it just makes you think and ponder because it's very philosophical. There are times where it makes you laugh out loud, and I don't know about you. When I'm reading a book, when I say, "Oh, it's so funny," I would have gone like, or like, I'll have like snorted or exhaled slightly more forcefully than I normally would throughout the course of breathing. However, there have been times where I chortled out loud because it was something that was funny or something that was absurd or ridiculous, and those are great moments in the book as well. There are times, a number of times in this book, that I cried. Let me tell you this, there's a lot of people that die in this book. And you will care about them. And they will pass away, and it is very sad. But it's less that it's like the sadness of them dying, although some of those things are very arresting and will make you shed a tear. What really got me is, especially towards the end of the book, those last 350 pages include some really sublime passages about grief and grieving and what it is to have people in your family and friends, people in the room that are not there, that you think should be, or that you want to be but cannot be. And the way that those are talked about and described is absolutely gut-wrenching, but also so accurate. And that's why it's gut-wrenching. It pierces you right to your heart with some of the things that he says. And that's what I talked about kind of earlier. He elicits things that we, at least me, speaking myself, regularly find hard to convey to other people in words that are sufficient. Tolstoy has the words that are sufficient, and that is what makes him such an incredible novelist. And I think that's why this is a book that stands the test of time as well. So, this is a 10 out of 10 book. It's an 11 out of 10 book. Everyone should read this at some point in their life. It doesn't have to be now. I realize that this is a massive endeavor, but do yourself a favor and pick up a copy and read it. If you have any questions about War and Peace, or if you want to know more about it, just ask. I will answer any questions that you have because I love this book. I will reread this at some point in my life. Not anytime soon, but I will do it. So, let's talk about some games that go in conjunction with War and Peace. So you cannot, I will say this, you cannot read this and not be like, I want to buy some Napoleonics games. You cannot do it. It is not possible. Uh, so, first up, I have a game entitled War and Peace by Mark McLaughlin. There's so many different iterations and editions of this game. This is the edition from 2020 from One Small Step. This is a hex encounter 2 to 5 player game that has pretty much the entirety of the Napoleonic Wars in it. There's different kind of scenarios, and you kind of link your campaigns together, because there's obviously big gaps between major campaigns where you form new different coalitions and things. Apparently that stuff's kind of whack in the game, but playing the scenarios, individual campaigns, individual coalitions works really well. This is one that I was hoping to have played by the time I finished this, but we just haven't had the schedule to do it. But this is a game that I own, that I will play, and I'm specifically interested in that Overland Russian campaign and what all that looks like. It reminds me, in a way, of what attracted me to something like Imperium Romanum. Big, grand hex encounter game about everything. This is Napoleonic's hex encounter, grand strategic everything. People really like it for what it is, I think, but again, I don't know how the linking campaign systems, how robust that is. That's the one complaint that I've heard about it, but it looks incredible. One day I will play this, and you'll like see stuff on the channel for it. Next up, I have a solitaire game called Field Commander Napoleon. Field Commander Napoleon also covers pretty much all the major campaigns from the Napoleonic Wars, but specifically this has a campaign of 1812 and 1813 in it. So you have the breakout from Prussia and Poland, marching across to Moscow, and then the 1813 campaign is turn tail and run, get all the way back, and fight back through Prussia and Austria to get home. Basically, it's there and back again, a Hobbit's tale. But it's there and back again, an Emperor's Tale. I don't know. This is from DBG. I really like this game. This, to me, is one of DVG's best offerings. It is a massive box, because it's got a ton of counters and mounted maps in it. And these games, you play as Napoleon, and it is trying to be as efficient as humanly possible to cross a map whilst fighting a bunch of battles. That's effectively what it is. But in this one, as opposed to something like Field Commander Alexander, this one has this tactical map where you will have cavalry and infantry and artillery, and you take your little army stack and you set them all up on this tactical board, and you issue orders to them, and you fight this tactical battle to resolve the battle. And it's just much more rewarding and involved and interesting than, here's my guys with some numbers, chuck a dice, that's what we're doing. I really, really liked it because, lots of logistics and lots of events go into your preparation for that battle. And so you get a much grander experience than some of the other Field Commander games. This is a wonderful game. If you can get a hold of it, you should do it. I actually bought this from Cool Stuff Inc. at Gen Con years ago from the Ding and Dent sale. I don't know if you can tell, this is all taped up, but I got it for like a really good price. It was really cool. But this is a wonderful game. Solitaire, maybe less intense. The rules are pretty simple once you kind of know them. Really, really, really like that game. Big thumbs up from me. The next one up I have is a game that I very recently purchased from Noble Knight Games. When we went to go visit them back in 2023, we were just browsing through their shelves, and they had this, which is Austerlitz, which is one of the 3 major battles that show up in War and Peace. This is the first game in the Napoleonic Brigade series from the gamers. And my understanding is that this uses a modified American Civil War Brigade series set of rules, and it was like $30. So, you know, if it sucks, it sucks. But I don't. We've played a lot of games that have come from the gamers through MMP, and they've pretty much all been very enjoyable and very good for some reason or another. This is an old one. The map is very saturated and kind of ugly as sin, but I'm very curious to see what this is like at some point. I do have in my shopping cart. I have the Austerlitz game from Hexasim, which is part of their Fallen Eagles series. So I have on the shelf, well, I don't know, it might be Eagles Rising. So I have Fallen Eagles 2 Waterloo. It's a Napoleonics game, but it's Waterloo, so it's nothing to do with. But this series, I have in the cart their Austerlitz game, which apparently is good. And I also have in my cart from them Highway to the Kremlin 2 from OSG, I think. And that is the game that I am, I think, most excited for, and I want to pull the trigger on. Because it is a big hex encounter game. It is stunning maps, by the way. But it's the whole campaign. And at the moment, I'm just kind of on a kick from that. I've been playing GCACW, which is Great Campaigns of the American Civil War. And whilst that's totally different, I love that style of game and what I'm doing on the map, and being able to do a similar conceptually type of thing in Napoleonics for that Russian campaign. I'm very excited to try that out. I have to purchase that to pull the trigger on that. But that's one that was recommended to me when I asked for recommendations. That was one that people were like, yes, go do this. I think the only other thing that I'm really looking for is a Borodino game. So I've got Austerlitz, that's fine, and I'm probably going to buy another one, like I said. But I would like a Borodino game. I don't know what that's going to look like format-wise, or what type of game, or who's going to make it. So if you have recommendations for a Borodino game, please put those in the comments. If it could be newer, so I don't have to pass an old rulebook, that'd be great. But I'm willing to take suggestions on that to see what that looks like. But all in all, I had just a stunning experience with War and Peace. It is every bit its reputation. It is every bit one of the greatest novels I've ever read, and probably of all time. It shoots right up into... It might be one of the best books I've ever read. And it is one of my favorites. But it's hard to unseat some of the books that I absolutely love. This is definitely one of them, though. This might be a top 5, if not a top 3 book for me. Because I think my favorite book of all time is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I absolutely love that book. And then it might be Moby Dick, and it might be War and Peace. War and Peace might be better. I think War and Peace is probably better than Moby Dick. But I have not formulated that, and that could change. But the Tale of Two Cities is not as good as this, but I love it. It's my favorite book, even though technically it might not be a better book, if that makes sense. Yeah, this was incredible. I really loved it. You should definitely go out and read it. Listen to an audio book. It's only 60 hours. If you listen to an hour a day, it takes you 2 months, right? Think about that. But do yourself a favor, and at some point in your life, read this book, and then you too will be searching for Napoleonics war games. It's unavoidable. I guess the other thing I have is a bit on the easier side is Commands and Colors Napoleonics of the Russian Army. I don't know, I keep forgetting I have these. For all of these Napoleonics discussions we end up having over the years. This is all the different battles in it. And it has all of the stuff that I'm looking for, but it's also C&C Napoleonics. It's fun, and I love it, and it's enjoyable, but I also want to have maybe a bit broader and more of a deeper experience with that. Because, line some blocks up and play some cards and move a wing is not the same thing as playing something like Fallen Eagles. But that's an option. If you're interested in games from the Russian campaign, buy the Napoleonics base set, and you buy that Russian box, and that gives you, gosh, it's like, I want to say it's 15, 16, 17 scenarios in it. Like, it has 3 different Borodino scenarios for the 3 different kind of sectors, because it was such a big, long battle, and the board's just not that big. But that's another option that you have. I used to have games like Coalition or Napoleon's Imperium from Compass Games. I just don't have the shelf space for as many games anymore, so I moved those on. Napoleon's Imperium is basically Axis and Allies, Napoleonics. Is it wildly kind of crazy? Yeah. Is it fun? I enjoyed what we did for the hours that we played it. Is it silly? Yeah, sure, why not? It is. But you could also have some fun beer and pretzels, grand strategic experience with that if that's what you were looking for as well. And, Russia has a big part to play in that campaign. But they end up fighting like the Ottomans most of the time as well. So, all that to say, go and read War and Peace. Go and play Field Commander Napoleon. Go and play Commands and Colors Napoleonics. Go and buy as many Napoleonics War games as you want. I give you permission. But if you have Borodino games that you want to recommend, put those in the comments. Or, frankly, any other Napoleonics games that you think I might be interested in, let me know. Because I'm picking up more of them, but we don't play as much Napoleonics. I'd like to play more and just... I'm doing more Napoleonics. Not a ton, but I'm doing more, and I want to do more. I think that's where I'm at with it. So thank you very much for tuning in. I've been Alexander for theplayersaid.com.